Thank you, everyone. I'd like to start by firstly acknowledging the Ngunnawal people on whose lands we meet today, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, pay my respect to their continuing culture and the contribution that they make to the life of our city and our region. I'd also like to acknowledge Senator Rice from Victoria, Wayne Patch, Chairman of the Bus Industry Confederation, and members of BIC. Of course, I'd also like to welcome all delegates here today to our city of Canberra for the 2019 Bus Industry Confederation National Conference, Moving People, a National Priority. Canberra is a progressive and connected city that is open to the world. We're home to the happiest, healthiest, best educated and best paid Australians, including the best paid bus drivers, and also the most modest Australians. We're leading the country in a range of areas, particularly in taking a responsible approach to managing climate change and our environment. And in 2020, the ACT will be the first jurisdiction outside of Europe to have 100% renewable electricity. This is achievable, and we've done it at the same time as maintaining some of the lowest electricity prices in the country. It's also the direction that the world is taking. Whole countries, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway and even Uganda also expect to transition to 100% renewable electricity next year. As a responsible government, we are showing what is possible when smart planning and considered investment is made using sustainable energy sources. Reaching 100% renewable electricity has made our next goal in reducing emissions very clear. Transport emissions now make up the largest source of emissions in the ACT, over 60% of the ACT's emissions, and so transport must be the focus of actions to address emissions going forward, including public transport. Earlier this year, the first stage of our light rail network commenced from the city to Gungahlin, powered by 100% renewable electricity. This is just the beginning of a long-term light rail network throughout Canberra, which is planned to extend over time to serve all of Canberra's town centres as well as employment districts. And the first stage of light rail alone now makes up 20% of trips taken on our public transport network. Buses will still remain an important part of Canberra's public transport future, and we need to transition our bus fleet to zero emissions. What this means is that when a bus is being charged in our electricity network, it will be charged on 100% renewable electricity. As part of our recent announced climate change strategy, the ACT government is committed to transitioning to a zero emissions bus fleet by 2040. This means replacing our entire fleet of over 450 buses with zero emissions vehicles. And in practical terms, this means that from 2025, we can't purchase any more diesel buses, none. At the moment, we are in the experimental phase in the transition. And last week I announced that the ACT government will be commencing operations of a fully electric bus. The Yutong E12 unibody bus is now used in hundreds of cities around the world, and we are looking forward to this bus taking passengers on our transport network next month. We've also teamed up with Canberra-based company Electromotive, which has installed the heavy vehicle refilling stations at our Tuggeranong depot. The earlier trial that we undertook in 2017 of Carbridge Toro electric buses and the E12 now entering our fleet will provide the ACT government with valuable operational experience while we plan for the transition to zero emissions. The transition to zero emissions buses requires detailed preparation and planning. Planning for the infrastructure, investment and skills that is required for a successful transition and to scale up. I know that many members of the public would like us to buy no more new diesel buses at all from today. That is what I hear every time I speak on this subject. But that just isn't possible, and it ignores the challenges and the scale of this transition, because it isn't just about buying buses. As you know, we need to have the infrastructure in place to support every zero emissions vehicle we purchase. Not only the charging infrastructure, it means investing in brand new bus depots, retrofitting our existing bus depots, and it means significant upgrades to the electricity grid so that we can actually have the electrical current that we need, the amperage to charge vehicles in a reasonable time frame. For example, the Yutong E12 is meant to only take 4 hours to charge, or 1 hour on supercharging, but it will take 6 to 7 hours currently with our current electric infrastructure. Another example is skills. We need to ensure that we have the skills to operate these new vehicles in the ACT. In the ACT, we have a dedicated workforce of diesel mechanics working on our existing fleet. Our vision is to ensure a just transition so that every single diesel mechanic gets the training that they need to work on electric vehicles so that no one is left behind. We also need to purchase the right zero emissions technology at the right time, and this means accounting for things such as bus range, infrastructure requirements, value for money and service standards. Today I'm announcing the preparation and planning that we are undertaking to move from a fossil fuel powered public transport system to a zero emissions system. To map out this path, we are preparing a zero emissions transport transition plan for Transport Canberra to enable the Territory to move from our current fleet of diesel and CNG buses to a zero emissions bus fleet by 2040. I'm also announcing the high-level steering committee that will be overseeing the development of Transport Canberra's zero emissions bus transition plan. The steering committee will be comprised of public and private industry experts. It will include high-profile transport academics, Dr. Lachlan Blackwell from ANU and Professor Peter Newman from Curtin University. We will also be benefiting from the outstanding experience on energy and climate of the former Victorian Renewables advocate and former ACT Minister for Transport and Climate Change, Simon Corbell, who is now the Chief Advisor for Energy Estate. Following my delegation to the United States in July, the Centre for Transportation and the Environment will also be involved. CTE has been working on similar transition plans in cities across the United States, and it's great to have them on board to contribute here to a transition plan in Australia. And representing the diesel mechanics, we have John Stewart from the Australian Manufacturers Workers Union, who will have a voice on the steering committee as well. The steering committee will provide the strategic direction and leadership to Transport Canberra in developing a comprehensive zero emissions transition plan. This will enable our government to make informed decisions on how to transition our bus fleet to zero emissions, including the technology, the timing, the risks, the costs, the benefits, financing and funding options. The plan will consider the infrastructure, the fleet, the policy, service principles and identify a suitable pathway for the ACT to transition to zero emissions vehicles, whilst also considering how we maintain our operational economic performance, our customer experience and broader public transport objectives. And a zero emissions transition plan for Transport Canberra will ensure that our workforce is supported with the skills that they need to make this transition, every worker. I am confident that this plan will provide a clear, robust and practical pathway to a zero emissions transport fleet, one that harnesses the technical and environmental opportunities and navigates the challenges around resources, systems, infrastructure, including charging infrastructure at our depots. This is a transition that will not only reduce emissions but provide economic and social benefits to the ACT and the surrounding region through cleaner air, reduced noise and more sustainable modern transport that is comfortable and accessible for Transport Canberra's customers. Now, I recognise that during this work that we need to continue our fleet replacement program to keep our bus fleet accessible and Canberrans moving. And that's why we'll continue to replace our ageing non-Euro standard fleet as we transition to zero emissions. Today I'm also announcing that 40 new Euro 6 buses will be added to the Transport Canberra fleet this month. The new 40 Scania BusTech Euro 6 buses will play a crucial role in modernising the existing fleet, which has 74 buses over 25 years of age. As well as lowering harmful emissions, being more reliable, the buses will of course be air conditioned and importantly meet our disability access requirements so that we can achieve our required legislative target of 100% accessible buses before the 31st of December 2022. Our government's $44 million investment in a further 84 buses will replace ageing buses and grow our fleet over the next 4 years as well. And this will include our first procurement of zero emissions buses based on our zero emissions plan. And I hope that many of the manufacturers in the room can be involved in that procurement process going forward. In conclusion, whether by mass transit, school services, personal mobility, buses will remain a crucial part of public transport networks around Australia and here in Canberra. This is a fleet that is transitioning around the world to a zero emissions future. Through detailed preparation and planning, the ACT is transitioning to a zero emissions bus fleet with the infrastructure and skills we need to make that transition successful. And we hope to play a leading role in the transition in Australia. Hosting the BIC conference in Canberra is a great opportunity to learn from some of the leading bus experts in Australia about how they are addressing challenges, including transitioning to a zero emissions fleet, and how we can position the Australian industry to benefit from this transition. I hope you all have an interesting and productive conference here in Canberra, and I wish you all the best on your stay in Canberra.